Hey guys, and welcome back to the 27th episode of the Warwick F1 Show. This is the 27th episode, like I just mentioned, of the 2025 Formula One season. And in this one, we are going to be looking back at the events that happened over the course of the British Grand Prix. A British Grand Prix which saw a British driver win in front of his home crowd. Lando Norris took the victory over the course of the last few days, leading his teammate who suffered from a controversial penalty that we will surely get into a little bit later in the show. They were joined on the podium by a first ever podium finish for Nico Hulkenberg, who after 238 previous starts was able to finally do it on the 239th. Let's just say the 239th might be the lucky number for this one. Lewis Hamilton was the one chasing Hulkenberg but couldn't make that overtake happen and finished in fourth, who also got rid of a streak, unfortunately getting rid of his 9 consecutive podium win streak here. I'm your host for this one, Anwar, and we are joined by 3 guests this time. We've got Lucy, a regular co-host of mine, and then we've also got James and Thomas, who are both returning guests. Firstly, I want to thank you guys all for coming onto the show. What I want to get from you firstly is a description of this race in one word. Starting with you, Thomas, what would be the one word you would describe this race as?
What? It's a bit chaotic. I mean, I went to see qualifying in person, where I didn't have the money to see the Grand Prix in person, so I was kind of a bit gutted and went. I just missed out on a race like that. Probably for the best, given it was raining a lot in the early part of the day. So, but yeah, it was a good race, and I think it's one that we've talked about for a long time.
Certainly going to be a Silverstone classic, as we talk about it for years and years, I reckon. James, how about you? What would be your descriptor for this?
Chaotic.
Yeah, that works. Explain why.
Well, we had the chaotic race. We had a lot of incidents, a lot of the order shuffling around. We had Hulkenberg coming from 19th on the grid, from last on the grid to finally get his maiden podium at the 239th time of asking. We had lots of spins, lots of crashes, lots of virtual safety cars and safety cars put in the early stage, some controversial stewards' decisions, and changeable conditions, and generally lots of chaos.
Really did have everything. There was not the only thing we were missing really was a red flag, but that's the only thing we could say didn't happen in this race. Lucy, we'll get your word now. We've had chaotic. We've had what is the next?
I mean, I don't know. It's not really a word. I genuinely feel watching that race took about 10 years off my life. Stress-inducing is one word for it, I guess.
We'll throw a hyphen in there, then it'll work.
Yeah, but no, like stress-inducing in a good way. It was definitely a classic. I mean, what was it? It was like the 75th race held at Silverstone or something like that. You know, it was F1's anniversary. They wanted a good one for it, and I think they got it.
We really did. It did its history well in terms of building on it and producing a phenomenal race. Before we get into the meat and potatoes of this pod, let's hand it to Lucy to do our race rundown.
Well, thank you. So we start off the race results from the British Grand Prix. Lando Norris taking his first home win in front of his home fans. Very special occasion for him. And it was a McLaren 1-2 with Oscar Piastri ending up in second, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, because for most of the race, he was not, in fact, in second. In P3, the totally predictable result of Nico Hulkenberg in Sauber, their first podium as Kick Sauber, their first podium as a general team since 2012, and the first podium for Hulkenberg after, as it's already been mentioned, the 239th time of asking. P4, Lewis Hamilton in the Ferrari, whose team apparently lost where he was on the GPS and yet still ended up in 4th, although maybe that was a good thing, but who did break his streak of podiums. Verstappen in P5, who recovered well, although considering he started on pole, maybe not so great. But given that he had a spin at a safety car restart and generally just seemed to have a car that didn't have the pace. Pierre Gasly in P6 for Alpine. As we shall see later, the other Alpine did not have a great time. But Gasly putting more valuable points on the board for them as they try to close some of the gap to the other constructors in the championship. Stroll in P7, very good result for him, very solid. Same with Albon in the Williams, finally not DNFing and in fact getting P8. Double points for Aston Martin with Fernando Alonso in P9, and a very solid double points haul as well, not like a P9 and 10 double points haul. George Russell in the Merc, continuing just what seems to be maybe a curse for him with his home race, just permanently doing terribly at Silverstone. And Mercedes will have been hoping for a much better outing, but made some strategy gambles that didn't work out. Ollie Behrman in the Haas was P11, the only rookie left standing at the end of this race, who was trying to close down to Russell to get some points, but didn't quite make it. Sainz, P12 in Williams, got a bit unlucky, bit of an anonymous race from him. Esteban Ocon in the Haas, so Haas cars did at least both finish. Charles Leclerc, P14 in the Ferrari. Maybe Ferrari works better when you can't see where you are on GPS, because clearly his team knowing where he was didn't do him any favours. And then Tsunoda, again, a fairly anonymous race from him in P15, although at least he actually finished the race, which is more that can be said for the remaining 5 drivers. Antonelli, DNF, involved in a collision with Isaac Hadjar, who was also DNF'd. I'm sure we'll talk about that incident at some point. Bortoletto had a spin into a wall and tried to keep it going, but ended up not being able to do so. Liam Lawson also had a spin into a wall, I believe, on the first lap and then DNF'd. And Colapinto, who probably thought that it couldn't get much worse after starting from the pit lane after a crash in qualifying. It could, in fact, get worse, because there's only one thing worse than starting in the pit lane, and that is not starting in the pit lane. And that was it. That was the British Grand Prix. The results, I think, show that McLaren were pretty dominant. But yeah, there you go.
Thank you very much, Lucy. I'm going to start this podcast a little bit differently, because we normally go through each driver going from top, going down the grid. Instead, we're going to do this because, as James mentioned, it was an incredibly chaotic Grand Prix. We're going to go through this chronologically. So I want to start with the first big kind of discussion point was the fact that we didn't have a full grid on the starting lineup, because we had drivers pull it into the pits to get rid of their intermediate tyres. Firstly, what do we make of cars making that gamble? Because we saw most of the front runners staying and keeping with their position, believing track position was more important. But we saw the likes of George Russell and Charles Leclerc take a gamble and putting on slicks early on. Do you think that was a worthy gamble, or do we like the fact that we saw this immediate variation in strategy?
Well, it was a gamble. It could have been the race-winning call. I mean, ultimately, it was the driver's decision whether to pit or not. I mean, Russell and Leclerc both chose themselves to pit, and it clearly wasn't the right call. I know the track did visibly look quite dry in the formation lap, and the commentators thought it was dried off for slicks, but it clearly was the wrong call. They were immediately much slower, and it ended up just dropping them to the back. The track was far too wet, particularly around Stone Vale, and they ended up dropping to the back. But it was a gamble, and ultimately one which took Russell and Leclerc out of contention at the front. But had the track been dry enough, then it could have been the race-winning call. But ultimately, it wasn't. It was a race.
I guess my question to all of you is: at the time, what was our perspective on it? Do we think, oh yes, this is going to get tasty, or did we think, oh no, they've taken too much of a risk here? What was everyone's perception at the time? Because it's easy to say in hindsight it was the wrong decision, but what was our immediate thoughts on it? starting with Lucy.
Yeah, I mean, I was lucky enough to be there, and when some of them said, "Oh, we're going to start on slicks," I was thinking, I don't think this is a good idea. But then I also, if we think about to quite a few years ago now, but it still feels like it was about 5 minutes ago, Hungary 2021, quite a shock race winner in Esteban Ocon, because after, like, at the end of, admittedly that was a reformation lap and stuff, but after that, some drivers made the gamble to go on to slicks, and it ended up being the right call. I was excited about the prospect that we would maybe see some. I love a split strategy call, and even more so when it's like a weather split strategy call. I didn't think it was the right move. It was pretty obvious quite immediately that it wasn't the right move. But it was still interesting. I'm glad that some of them went for it, even though I'm sure that those drivers who went from it are not, in fact, glad that they went for it.
Definitely a tinge of regret for someone like George Russell, who did give up a pretty decent starting position to make that gamble, but clearly wasn't the right one. Thomas, pivoting to you here, I wanted to get your perspective of what that meant for the rest of the race in terms of that kind of elevated cars into positions that we didn't really expect. I guess, looking at it overall, did we think that that was the decision that ruined races, or do you think it was still recoverable after that point for someone like Russell or someone like Leclerc, who had the cars to probably propel themselves up in spite of that strategy? Do you think that was the make or break for some of the races?
I think so. I think kind of always putting extra than other people is going to cost a lot of time. Even with a fast car, it's sometimes you're not going to make up that time. So, yeah, I do think it was make or break in that situation. But they took the gamble. Did it pay off? Who knows? But we're getting into hypotheticals there.
Yeah, I mean, the payoff could have been brilliant, but clearly, unfortunately for the likes of George Russell, who was probably targeting a win, it's probably a bit of pill to swallow, particularly at his home race. But after that, the first lap, I guess it was Verstappen who kept the lead ahead of Piastri, and then Lando Norris close behind. But the next thing we saw was the Red Bull struggling to keep the tyres intact, but saw Verstappen fall into the grips of Oscar Piastri, who was eventually able to make an overtake on him for the lead. The Red Bull, immediately looking, to me at least, looked like a car that was struggling in terms of keeping up to the pace while maintaining the tyres in spite of the wet weather. Do you think, they mentioned on broadcast that they went for a different type of setup? Do you think that played a significant role in them falling into the pack, I guess, James?
Yes, I mean, well, we know that the Red Bull had gone for a very different setup. I mean, they obviously had a very different setup, and they were 10 kilometres an hour faster than McLaren in the street straps in quality. There's a huge difference. They clearly gone for a very extreme setup choice, which might have been right, and they worked on Saturday, got them pole, going for a dry setup, but didn't work on Sunday when the rain fell, perhaps heavier than Red Bull expected, and that car looked pretty undrivable. Weather clearly had no pace to match the McLaren's before that spin at the safety car restart, dropped him down to 10th, and then then he was stuck down in 10th until DRS was enabled, at which point he managed to recover to 5th. Same time, without the spin though, a podium was probably on there. I think he was slightly quicker than Hulkenberg. He'd probably been P3 without the spin though. But yeah, in Tsunoda was nowhere pace-wise. I mean, the penalty for crashing into Airman was pretty harsh, but he had no pace whatsoever. He ended up finishing last by almost 40 seconds, which is really not good. Second race in a row, he's been last by miles as well, and he's gone 6 races without a point. It really is a one-car team now. Now with the team principal gone as well.
Yeah, 100%. We'll talk about the team principal discussion in the next episode. We'll keep that as an exclusive topic, I guess. But focusing back onto the Red Bull, like you mentioned, they probably did have the pace, but they clearly didn't have the pace to match the McLarens, which is why Piastri made that overtake so easily. And Piastri was able to then stretch out a massive lead ahead of the rest of the pack. He was nearly 15 seconds or something like that. Lucy, does that were we impressed in terms of how Piastri was managing that race in terms of pace? Because he was blowing the rest of the field away until the first kind of safety car period in lap 14. Was that impressive to you, or was that just a reflection of just the lack of spray when you're leading from the front and the rest of it?
Yeah, I mean, there was probably less he had to contend with because he was at the front and therefore wasn't trying to navigate the spray and just had to manage his tires. But I genuinely think, like, in any scenario, and especially in wet conditions, if you can pull out like 13 seconds, I think it was, like a 13-second gap over second place when you're in the lead, that's never going to not be impressive, like, no matter how good your car is, because that's always just going to be like, whoa. And so also I just even though talking about Red Bull, I think it's quite funny to imagine going like back in time, like 2 years, and playing the phrase, I think Verstappen was slightly faster than a Sauber, to ourselves, but 2 years ago when Red Bull were completely dominating. I just think that's quite funny. But no, I was impressed with Piastri. It looked very calm, like he wasn't sliding around. The conditions didn't seem to be bothering him too much, although that probably was aided by the fact that he wasn't trying to overtake people, because when you're not trying to overtake and it's wet, you don't have to go onto the wet line at all. You can just stick on the racing line in a way that you don't when you're trying to make overtakes, because there's only one racing line and it's not two cars wide. But still, it was very impressive. It was still cool, even if maybe him being able to make a bit of a gap would have been kind of expected.
Yeah, I think it's the extent of the gap which was particularly impressive. But that gap was wiped out after the heavy rain downpour forced out a safety car. Now, Thomas, how do you think that impacted the race in terms of what did that downpour mean for the drivers, do you think?
Yeah, I think it definitely hurt Piastri most. I think he would have won if it wasn't for that. I think just kind of from then on, it just, Piastri's race just kind of fell apart. As for everyone else, I mean, they're drivers, it's kind of something they need to manage themselves. Which, I mean, of all people, Stroll was probably the best one out there. So I don't know how he managed to do that, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Stroll, and it's absolutely right to mention, because he was one of the people who actually did have a little bit of a stint on a set of slicks, a little bit admittedly later compared to the people at the beginning who boxed on that formation lap. He put on the soft tires and was able to make such a leap that he ended up in third place after this, right? It's very impressive to see. Whilst Alonso was complaining, his teammate was complaining about poor strategy, he was the one who inherited a great strategy, which lofted him into a podium position. Now, the safety car that we were mentioning came as a result of the downpour, and Piastri was able to keep the lead from that safety car restart. The next important moment of this race, however, was the next safety car coming out, which is when Isaac Hadjar ran into the back of Kimi Antonelli, bringing the end of the race for both of those rookies. This brought out a second safety car, which then leads us to the kind of penalty that defined this race, which saw Piastri on the safety car restart brake on the Hangar Straight, and Verstappen overtook him under the safety car as a result of how harsh the braking was, and bunched up the pack. And then once we got going again, Verstappen spun as a result, maybe due to that kind of slowing down. Firstly, I want to get everyone's impression on the penalty which was given for this, because Oscar Piastri was punished with a 10-second penalty. What was everyone's perspective on this? Starting with you, Thomas. Was this a fair penalty for the FIA to give out?
I mean, I don't know. I think from what I've heard, it sounded like a fair penalty. If he's kind of being a bit weird under the safety car, then obviously that's dangerous, and especially under a safety car. The whole point is that you're slowing down, and you're being predictable. You can't really do that. So,
James, do you agree with this sentiment? It was naughty, or do we think that the FIA are being particularly dictator-like with this one?
He did brake very suddenly. I mean, in a very short distance, he decreased his speed from about 130 miles an hour to about 30 miles an hour, which is a huge amount to drop. They said his braking pressure, the intensity brake, that was double what Russell braked at in Canada. Dispute. But on the other hand, was he trying to back off to get Piastri to get Verstappen to cool down his tyres and help Verstappen, or was he just backing off to avoid overtaking the safety car? It was a late call. And he, interestingly, backed off by about the same amount of the previous safety car restart. And she didn't do anything then, although apparently they weren't that happy with it then either. But you'd think they should have really warned McLaren if it wasn't good enough. I mean, if he got away with it at the first restart, I'd probably think it was fine to do that. So maybe if they were angry about it, they should have said something earlier. But ultimately, it was a bit erratic. And obviously, it can be very dangerous if the leader keeps accelerating and decelerating at a restart. We've seen people do that before when it caused chaos and further back in the pack. But it was difficult conditions. But on the other hand, it was very erratic. So I think it's just about justified, yeah.
Lucy, do you agree that this was just enough to warrant a 10-second penalty? Or, I guess, would you rather have this been a 5?
I would like to preface this by saying that I watched this race surrounded by a group of Australians, but I think I wasn't actually paying attention when this happened, so I can't really comment on it exactly. Having had a look at it and also how it affected people further back on the grid, I think it definitely warranted a penalty. I don't think there's anything worth debating around that. He definitely broke a rule. I felt that 10 was a little overly harsh, just given that it does seem this year like 10 seconds is kind of the maximum that the FIA is sort of willing to go. I know that we saw, I think it was a stop-go penalty for Russell in Monaco, I think it was. But apart from that, it does just feel that 10 seconds is kind of what the FIA are treating as like the maximum penalty. So I did think that was a little bit harsh for something which I was able to miss by not paying that much attention to. I probably would have gone for 5 seconds, but I think, to be honest, it kind of, for me, it's just that it kind of shows it doesn't really feel like, and I know it's important for independent stuff like that, it doesn't really feel like any of the FIA stewards at different races consult with each other. Like the fact that we're having a debate around, was it a 10-second or should it be a 5-second or should it be anything at all, is kind of like that. We shouldn't be having this debate over, like, we shouldn't be debating it because of, we don't know what falls into what category. We should be debating it over, did he do it or not, which we've kind of conceded that he did it. So it should be clear then what the penalty is. I would probably have gone 5 seconds, but, I can see why they maybe went 10 seconds. But, like, I'm not an FIA steward. I don't really know.
I mean, I would probably lean towards it being a 5. I do think he did slow down, as James mentioned, the deceleration that he did. was pretty significant, right? I guess the one thing that I would say that is a mitigating factor is how late the FIA made the decision for the safety car to come in. Because if you actually look at the safety car lights, they only go out once they've hit the hanger straight, which is a pretty late decision to be making. And I guess that should have probably fed into some of the discussion about that penalty. So I felt 10 was harsh. But ultimately, that's what he was given. And that kind of took the sting out of that Grand Prix, because we saw that Piastri showed significant pace in those wet weather conditions, right? He was able to pull out 15 seconds earlier in the race, as we mentioned prior. And it would have been interesting to see if that was a 5, how that race would have played out. But we saw that all happened, and that kind of meant that Norris was in the driving seat in terms of ensuring that he stayed just behind him but not too far away until the kind of next important moment for them in the race, which was that pit stop. Before then, let's talk about the Hulkenberg versus Stroll fight. Stroll was occupying that third podium position, but clearly wasn't able to keep his tyres intact, which gave us Hulkenberg which led to Hulkenberg entering the podium positions. There was obviously the threat of Lewis Hamilton behind. Were we all hoping for a Lewis Hamilton podium in front of his home fans at this point, or did we want Hulkenberg to break his podium drought? What was everyone's perspective at that time? Starting with you, Lucy.
Oh, I knew you were going to make me go first. I will admit, I mean, either way, I would have been happy. It would have been something cinematic, either Lewis Hamilton's first podium with Ferrari or Nico Hulkenberg's first podium. I was rooting for Hulkenberg just because I thought it was cool, and because, I don't know, within my own brain, although we'll probably have a debate around Ferrari and how incompetent they are, so maybe this will age like milk, I feel like Nico Hulkenberg being in a position to get a podium is genuinely like a once-in-a-lifetime experience. I mean, now I've said that, he'll probably get a streak of like 10 podiums, and then you can all listen back to this episode and laugh at me. But I thought this is like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, like this is never going to happen again. And I was excited. I thought it was cool. But like I said, had Lewis overtaken him for the podium, I would have been happy to. To be honest, I just didn't want like Hamilton to go for an overtake and then one of them like lock up and they both DNF'd. I think that would have just ruined my whole day. So I'm just glad that didn't happen.
How about you, James? Was there any preference in terms of Hulkenberg versus Hamilton? Because that was ultimately the fight that we were all looking at in terms of.
Well, they both would have been good to see, because I mean, Hamilton. It would have been great to see Hamilton finally get his first podium for Ferrari and continue at Silverstone and continue his incredible streak of 12 podiums in a row at Silverstone. I think it's a record at any track. So to see him continue that streak, but with his first ever podium for Ferrari, would be quite amazing. But I still prefer to see Hulkenberg after all those years in F1. It's over 15 and a half years since he made his F1 debut, been in F1 for 12 and a half years. Not only the most races without a podium, but also has the most races without a win. Yet, despite being a side midfield driver, it's hard to believe he hasn't even finished on the podium. I mean, Tsunoda's the only other non-rookie on the current grid who, now the only non-rookie on the current grid who hasn't been on the podium. So, is so overdue, particularly since it seemed like his career was over as well when he left F1 at the end of 2019. Renault was out of the sport for 3 years, apart from the on-reserve driver appearance, and not many people come back after that. And when he returned was with Haas. Then this year we moved to Sauber, which we thought was going to be a backmarker. I mean, they didn't even score a point until the penultimate race last season. They have Sauber's first podium for 13 years as well. We know that team's becoming Audi, but they've been so slow in recent years. And only suddenly, the last few races, they've suddenly seen quick. And he was starting last in the grid as well. So to see him finally break that podium drought is brilliant.
Yeah, 100%. Thomas, where was your kind of loyalty towards here?
Well, who has more podiums and who doesn't have a podium? That's the question. Yeah, I was kind of rooting for Hulkenberg. I mean, I didn't think it was going to happen. I thought, well, the tire difference was going to make a factor in it, but no, Hulkenberg managed to hold on, and kind of very happy for him, because it seems like his whole career was like just you don't have any podiums. That was kind of the whole joke, was he doesn't have any podiums, no matter how kind of well he does. He just never ever gets a podium, and he's finally able to kind of, take that off, take that reputation off of him.
Yeah, look, you don't want your career defined by that one joke, right? I think that's like you mentioned, that was what everyone would always refer to about him, and now we can kind of get rid of that as like a whole discussion, which is nice. We'll go on to the last.
I just want to say one more quick thing about that. Is that I think, like, whoever you were rooting for in that battle, and also initially, like, Lance Stroll was there. That he started off there, he got back down a bit, but there was a time when he was in third place. Like, at no point throughout that whole battle did I think it's inevitable, like Hulkenberg's in a Sauber, Hamilton's in a Ferrari, it's inevitable that he's going to get overtaken. Or even like when Stroll was up there, I was like, there's no guarantee. And like, I was surprised to see a Sauber and an Aston Martin up in like third and fourth at that point. I was surprised to see them ahead of the Ferraris, but there was no point where I thought, oh, this is just a fluke and they're going to go tumbling back down the grid. Well, at no point did that happen, and that kind of surprised me, because like I didn't think, oh, it's only a matter of time before this overtake happens. Throughout the whole time I was like, I don't know, maybe Sauber will get a podium here. And I just think, that's probably what made it so exciting, is that it didn't feel sort of, can Hulkenberg sort of stall for enough time? Can he run out the clock before Hamilton catches up to him? It felt like a genuine, this could really be on for like a proper podium fight here, which is just cool.
Yeah, I also was with you. I thought, okay, it's inevitable Hamilton will get through, and we'll get to that after we talk about the next point. But that was the fact that he was able to hold him back was crazy. It was very bizarre for me. It's like, oh my god, what's going on here? We'll go on to the last point of this last kind of main point of this race, which was the switch back onto the slick tyres. We saw Hamilton take a bit of a gamble by going first amongst the front runners. And look, we knew that Hamilton and the Ferraris would want to take a risk, because they feel that they're ultimately here to win, not here to get podiums. They're here to win races, win championships. So it made sense that they went for a gamble. Did we think that Hamilton would have got? How do we think all the team kind of managed that last stint going back onto the slicks? Was there any team that you looked in particular and thought, yes, they've managed that very well? Thomas, starting with you.
I think everyone was all right on the slicks, really. I think kind of just, it's always a risk, especially if you could run out wide or kind of go onto the wet patches, but I think everyone did all right.
Yeah, I also was going to say that. I guess, does anyone else agree with that? There was no team in particular that dealt with that really well. It kind of all stayed the same at the end.
Well, I only think Alonso and Russell pitted a bit too early, but they didn't end up losing out too much in the end. Well, Alonso didn't lose out too much in the end, but Russell then had that spin on the slicks. In terms of the other ever made was by Aston Martin was putting Stroll on the softs, which clearly was not the right decision for the final stint. They ended up dropping off quite significantly, and he was passed by Gasly and Verstappen in the last couple of laps, and ended up down in P7 after having a strong race. After Aston Martin made the best strategy earlier with Stroll. I mean, he got up to P3 earlier because he'd actually done a very unconventional strategy. He'd pitted at not for slicks early on, but not when the others did. He waited until lap 6 to pit for slicks, when they were actually quicker behind the VSC, and then as soon as it was getting wet again, he then pitted for inters 4 laps later, and that actually worked really well, and that got him up to third in the first place. It was ultimately the strategy which got Hulkenberg up there in the first place as well. He pitted 2 laps before most. When the rain had come down earlier, he pitted 2 laps earlier than most of the others for the new inters, and with the new inters being better than the rain, that's how he got up the order, and then he'd overtaken Stroll to move on to the podium. So ultimately, we're more of a difference early on the strategy than it did later on with the change back to slicks.
Yeah, I mean, I agree in terms of it didn't really shake up the order. Alonso obviously went early. I think that's more reflective of his risk-averse nature, I guess. Someone who obviously is very much all or nothing. So it made a lot of sense. That was probably kind of the biggest thing towards the end. The biggest thing towards the end was that Hulkenberg versus Hamilton kind of battle, which, like we mentioned, Hulkenberg navigated very well. And that brought us to the end of the race. So that was kind of like our chronological kind of overview of this race, because there was so much going on. This probably is a better way of looking through that. In terms of overall, what was our biggest takeaways from this race in terms of is obviously the Hulkenberg story was phenomenal. We've mentioned that. What was our perspective of the race at the front? Do we think that the penalty really took the sting out of the Grand Prix and kind of ruined it in a way? What was our perspective of that? Do we think that as soon as Piastri got that penalty, this was game over?
I mean, I think that had Piastri not been given a penalty, or had he been given a penalty later, or even had it been a slightly like a 5-second instead of a 10-second penalty, it might have been more interesting, because we may have ended up with a fight between him and Norris, like for the lead. Even just like, because when people did all their pit stops at the end, is that Piastri did go in a lap early. And considering that he had a 14-second long pit stop, like including his penalty, he came out only about 5 seconds behind Norris. So had he had a 5-second penalty instead of a 10-second penalty, we either could have had them having a fight before that pit stop and him serving the penalty, or, you know, maybe they came out of the pits alongside each other or something, which could have been interesting. I don't think it took away from the race. And I also think, I don't know if we're exactly halfway through because of sprint races, but that was the 12th race of this season, and there's 24 races. So at the halfway point, yes, the constructors is pretty much sewn up, but there's 8 points in it in the Drivers' Championship. There is still quite a lot of interest in the constructors. You know, Mercedes and Ferrari are pretty close to each other. And from Williams in 5th to Haas in 9th is only like a 30-point differential. And as Sauber have shown, they jumped from 9th to 6th in one race. I think that it's shaping like as the halfway point of the season, especially if we get more races like that. And if, you know, the front runners are going to fight each other more, we're going to maybe have more surprise podiums. I think it could be a really cracking rest of the season if we even get like half the level of drama that produced in races from now on.
Yeah, I mean, look, you mentioned the 8 points. That 15-point gap is now 8 because of the Norris win. Now that makes this championship more interesting. It's obviously a lot closer, but I feel this is the type of gap that's just going to ebb and flow throughout the duration of this championship. In terms of just general momentum, do we think that Norris looks in a lot better shape now after these last couple of races, where he has actually had to keep out of it and battle his teammate head to head? Do we think this is do you think that his performances, I know the points say a different story, say a certain story, do we think that the performances of Lando Norris give us hope for the season going forward, Thomas? Do we think that he's absolutely capable of winning this championship?
I think I need to repeat what I said in the previous episode, that Yeah, I mean, did Lando win because of the penalty? I'm not sure. But I think Piastri, the first part of that race, he was just pulling away. It just seems to be kind of the trend, and that Piastri just has that little bit extra than compared to Norris. But I think this was Piastri's moment where kind of something snapped. I think he wasn't happy in the kind of cool down room. So who knows? Maybe there's a bit of doubt coming into Piastri's mind, but at the moment I still trust him more than Norris.
I mean, you mentioned the frustration. That is probably the first time I've seen him properly frustrated. James, do you think that is was that something that you noticed as well, or do we think it's just part and parcel of what F1 drivers have, and he was more so feeling wronged about the whole situation more than frustration?
He did seem a bit angry at the penalties. Normally, I've cool, very calm Piastri, but he clearly was frustrated at the penalty. I mean, he wasn't like mega angry. He still had like a pretty normal discussion with Hulkenberg in the cool down room. But by Piastri standards, he was quite angry. I mean, it did cost him the victory ultimately. Their two McLarens had pretty similar pace up front, and but not for the penalty, then Piastri would have won the race. And now the momentum is with Norris after Norris's error in Canada, running back with his teammate. He has bounced back by winning the next two races, and the gap is down to just 8 points, which should be epic for the second half of the season. But it is still pretty close. At the same time, Piastri certainly should not be counted out by any means. I mean, he did out-qualify Norris, and he would have won, but not for the penalty. Although Norris was ahead in quali in Austria, I did get the sense Piastri had a slight edge on race pace there. So it's very much still on the championship. And you can see why Piastri's angry, though, because there's only a 14-point swing, really, compared to if he'd won the race. So that could be key at the end of the day when it comes to the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean, this is the championship battle is only going to rage on, right? So interesting to see how that plays out. In terms of just a few midfield runners that we should just probably talk about, Pierre Gasly got a very impressive P6 in an Alpine car that has shown very little in the way of pace or consistency over the last few weeks. I guess consistently slow is something that is consistent, I guess, but they've not really shown a lot, and he was able to get a significant points haul this weekend. Is he truly outperforming this car, or do we think this is a reflection of how big the chasm is between the two drivers at Alpine, Lucy?
I wouldn't say there's a chasm. I think Gasly is outperforming the car, and maybe there is also something to be said with the fact that when Gasly goes racing, he is not sort of haunted by the permanent fear for his job, which is probably allowing him to, maybe, like, he didn't have very good practice sessions. He can probably mess around with the setup a bit more and kind of go for it, take some more gambles compared to all the rookie teammates that he's had. This was a very good race from Gasly, and I think probably kind of shows the value of having experience in wet races like this. It was really all the rookies, apart from Behrman, who did quite well, who DNF'd, and it was kind of the drivers who had more experience who performed better, on average. And so, I reckon this was a good race for Gasly, but I don't think we can use it to sort of extrapolate information about sort of the inherent teammates and performance differentials, because races like this are always a little bit harder to judge when you've got rookies involved.
With Alpine, well, Gasly's been a bit hit and miss this season. He's only made quite a few errors, but in Silverstone he was going very well. It was a great drive to P6, pretty flawless. Felt like very much he was dragging that car, holding off faster drivers behind, and just a very good performance. in terms of, Colin Pinto didn't even get to start the race in the end, so he got just too much from that, although the crashing quali was clearly not good and condemned into the back of the grid. Colin Pinto, it's not been a huge upgrade on Durham, but it has only been 6 races, which was all they gave Durham, but that's pretty harsh. But at the same time, that Alpine is the slowest car on the grid. It's got no race pace, and it's not been brilliant for Colin Pinto, but it is the slowest car. There does seem to be quite a big gap, but whether will he get more time or will Alpine replace him with Bottas at some point is a question, but you will have to see.
Yeah, I mean, they've got no business being up there, right? So very, very interesting to see that happen. Is there any other discussion we want to talk about in terms of other drivers or anything like that? Because I feel we've talked about
maybe we can mention Leclerc not having another not very good race in the rain.
It feels like a bit of a pattern now, isn't it? Leclerc underperforming in wet. Do you think this is a reflection of?
He's not good in the rain at all. I mean, he's not good in the rain at all. I mean, he ends up only ahead of Tsunoda in the end. I mean, because starting on slicks was not the right call, but then he had bit of a slid off the road late on at Stowe and collected Sainz, which the TV director kind of missed, which kind of ruined Sainz's race as well. This is why Sainz was outside the point. He slid off at Stowe and ended up second last, but never seemed to have really much pace, was stuck in traffic all race. But he never goes well in the rain at all. I mean, in Australia, he had a spin and ended up down in 8th. Last year, in Canada, he had no pace before retiring, and at Silverstone last year, he was 14th as well in the rain. He's never gone well in the rain at all. Always seems to be lots of errors, and just, I don't know what it is with Leclerc in the rain, but that does seem to be his weakness, and that could be a problem if he's ever in a championship battle in the future, which surely will be one day. That might be a key weakness for him.
Yeah, it's something that he's going to have to work on. Thomas, do you have anything to say about the Leclerc weakness here in the wet? Because he had a horror race this weekend, let's be honest.
I think it's just kind of a general lack of confidence or just frustration. He was very angry on the radio in qualifying. So, yeah, I think just in general, Ferrari at the moment is something's not right. And, yeah, I think both drivers are starting to kind of just lose faith in, this season, I guess.
They're going to have to hope, and they're kind of looking to fast forward to next year, I think, the both of them. I think that's the honest truth of it. So we'll see how that develops over the season, if Leclerc can get over the hump in wet weather conditions. That's pretty much all. We'll go to our predictions segment of the show now, and then wrap it up there. We had, I believe we had 4 different predictions to go through, 2 of which are not here. We don't have Daniel here, and we don't have Callum here, so I'll just go through both of theirs. But we've got Lucy's predictions right here. Lucy, do you want to kick us off here, or do you want me to kick us off?
I'll do it. I'm looking at these.
You.
I don't know why I made any of these predictions. I genuinely think that you'd texted me asking for my predictions, and I'd probably been awake for about like 5 minutes, and so there was no thought going into these. I said Norris would be on pole. Not that unreasonable, I'll take it.
Fair prediction.
Was okay. Unfortunately, I did get Saturday and Sunday a little mixed around, because I then said Verstappen was going to get P1. I'm slightly wishing that I had swapped that, because if I'd said he'd got pole, I would have got actual points in one of these prediction things for once. I said Norris P2, so that is some points, because he finished P1, it counts. I said Piastri P3, which is also some points, because he got P2. And I mean, I did predict accurately which McLaren would outperform the other, so that's something. I said Antonelli P4, which we're not going to talk about, we're just going to move on from. And I said Leclerc P5, which again, we're just going to move on from that as quickly as possible.
Yeah, look, I mean, I for the most part, I don't think we got many of these particularly right. I don't think it's as high scoring as what we had last week. I think you Yeah, I mean, he just got unlucky with Leclerc having a bit of a stinker in the wet. And Verstappen having an uncharacteristic spin. Two things that I guess would be pretty hard to predict. So don't blame you at all. Let me go through mine, and then I'll go through Daniel and then Callum's as well. I predicted once, like you, Lucy, a Norris pole. Didn't happen because both his teammate and Verstappen pulled out laps to beat him. But I also did say he would convert this pole. Now, he didn't convert a pole, but he certainly won. So that's a nice 3-pointer there. I put Hamilton in second. I was feeling really patriotic, so I felt he was going to continue this consecutive podium streak, maybe get to the 10th. Did not happen. A kick Sauber or an Xbox on wheels decided, no, that's not going to happen, and ruined the day. So I didn't get any points for that. Put Piastri in P3, or get a singular point there. I put Russell in P4, did not get that. And I put Verstappen P5. But I got the right answer, but probably not the right method behind it. So we'll take it, I guess. Did not expect him to make the progress back through the field that he did. So fair play to him. Daniel, in for his top 5, decided to put, if I can find it quickly. Oh, God, I don't know what he put for pole. Oh, no. I'll check it in post. But he said that Russell would get a win. He felt very patriotic. I'm pretty sure he said pole George Russell as well, which didn't happen. But I'll make sure I'll go and check that to make sure I'm not breaking the spirit of play here. He put Russell P1, didn't happen, finished down in the lower echelons of the points. He put Hamilton in P2 and Norris in P3, which is a very British podium. Unfortunately, we had only one Brit on the podium, not 3. He put Piastri in P4, so like the rest of us, has got Norris Piastri the right way around, which is an interesting sight to see. He put Antonelli in P5. No one could have predicted him getting T-boned by a racing bulls. So that was his top 5. Callum's top 5 was a pole position for Lando Norris. Like me and Lucy, we all got that wrong. He also put a Norris victory as well, so he got awarded 3 points there. He also put a Piastri second place. He predicted the 1-2 the correct way round. Very impressive. Got another 3 points there. Verstappen in P3 for him. Russell in P4. Leclerc in P5. All net, no points. So that was everyone's top 5. Lucy, what was your DNF and random prediction then?
I said that Russell was going to DNF based on the fact that he has trash luck at his home Grand Prix. He didn't DNF, but he did get like P11. So I was along the right. I was along the right. Oh no, he got P10. Of course, I was along the right lines though. Considering that like 2 races ago he won, he's probably not best pleased with it. Especially if you believe all the rumors about his job. Anyway, and then my random prediction was Haas double points. Rather annoyingly, I was thinking, should I say Aston are going to get double points? And then I was like, you know what? No, that's too unrealistic. Haas might actually get double points. Yeah, I shouldn't have gone for that.
Horrible decision making,
I would also like to say, though, that I now feel like it is success. It is that Hulkenberg's podium I now feel makes it reasonable for me to go back predicting Williams podiums, because if Sauber get a podium, Williams can too. So be prepared for a return to my peak Williams delusion era.
We're going to see Williams P2, Williams P3 from here on out, guys. It's not my fault. It's her. So send her the anti-Williams propaganda, please. I put Williams DNF in Carlos Sainz. No, he just got a very anonymous a race from him. I guess both Williams kind of were anonymous here. Didn't really see a lot of them. And my random prediction was a first lap safety car or more. Now, I'm pretty sure we didn't get a safety car immediately, and so we didn't get that first lap safety car, if I've got that right. So no points there, unfortunately, for me. We'll go to the other DNF and random predictions. Daniel put a DNF for Pierre Gasly. Not quite. And he also said the random prediction was the total number of laps under the safety car was going to be above 9, which was a very unique prediction that I have to check because I'm pretty sure we got close to it.
What the heck is that?
It's a very, very. I complimented it. I was like, oh my god, this is a nice prediction actually. Let me just make sure I've got this right because I think he may have got the prediction right. All right. Apparently, okay. So according to what I've seen, he's very unlucky because apparently we had 9 laps of safety car action. So he got it basically on the nose, but didn't get the exceeding. So unfortunately, no points for him. If he does come back and say, "Oh, it is actually 10," I will be able to pull it back and give him the points because that is crazy to get that on the nose. And the last one was Callum saying that we would get 2. His DNF was again Carlos Sainz, and his wild prediction was 2 drivers being taken out at Cops. Now, I want to preface this by saying we had Isaac Hadjar taken out at Cops. Would we say Antonelli was taken out at Cops because the damage inflicted there meant that he retired? Would we accept that as what's everyone's consensus on this?
Yeah.
Is that an acceptable prediction?
Yes.
Okay.
The
Yeah, it's
incident
fine,
they
we'll
got
give
taken
it-
out was at Cops.
We'll give it to you. Yeah.
I think it's specific enough for us to warrant giving this because I think ultimately he should have retired there and then, but just kept it going just in case.
Listen, given like the general performance of some of our predictions this week, we need the wins we can get. We'll give it to you.
Which would mean that Callum has got 9 points this weekend, which is an incredibly good haul considering.
Which is
the rest of
exactly
us.
the same number of laps that took place behind the safety car.
Unfortunately for Daniel, that's going to be something that's going to torment him for the next week. Well, that brings us to the end of this episode of the pod, where we reviewed the British Grand Prix. I want to thank my 3 guests for coming on, Lucy, Thomas, and James. We will see you at some point later this week, where we will be talking about the news about Christian Horner. So until then, I thank you guys very much for listening or watching from your seats at home, and we'll see you then. Goodbye.